But we must finish the conversation. I would like to invite all the panelists back on stage, please. Venkat ji, Chaitanya, Kamayani. Really, Katya, Take on Art, thank you for bringing together these wonderful conversations. The curation and the way the voices have been put together to create this dialogue, I think it's deeply moving. For me personally, I think my brain is just rolling along with so many questions and so many thoughts. But I'll try to put together just a few responses since I'm here for that, and then open it up to the audience. So many different things have come up today, but something in the way they were speaking today reminded me of something that I read this morning on Instagram. We're all on Instagram. So it said, I'm having a conversation with one of my friends, and I asked him, what defines you? And he responded with, nothing. A definition excludes the possibility of change. And for that, this person said, that's one of the best responses I've ever received to a question. Now, this whole idea of the definition, we are in a platform where we are trying to define, and yet I think that we are constantly aware of this notion of not necessarily needing to define everything. And it really reminds me of Edward Glisson's opacity. I mean, the whole idea of opacity, where we perhaps don't need to know everything about every single practice in order for us to be able to assimilate with it or become part of it. And it really, struck a chord when Chaitanya was talking about this difference between rootedness and belonging, and the way we all see that in a very different way. With this platform, I just wanted to also say that as much as it is about presences, because we are all present here, we're all representing something, some thoughts, but it's also about absences. We are aware of voices that are absent, genders that are absent, geographies that are absent, but we still sit here in solidarity. And we're able to share this platform, have these discussions, and hope that we try to fill in these little gaps that keep appearing every now and then. The one thing that I myself, as here I do want to remember vernacular in the contemporary. Amit Jain is here. It was a beautiful exhibition that I had the opportunity to work on with Devi Art Foundation. With Jackfruit Research and Design. And so many different learnings keep coming back from these interactions with artists who are practicing and living lives in a way that is attuned to ecology, attuned to nature, attuned to rhythms of life that need not be constructed on production necessarily. Edge of Desire, curated by Chaitanya Sambrani, I think was one of the path-breaking kinds of exhibitions that came together for me as an art historian and curator, that allowed me then in my practice to build these bridges and bring these art practices together as well. So thank you for that, Chaitanya. A couple of things that also come to mind. Katya in the morning mentioned the Sami people, and this is something a Sami artist once said to me. It is about whose story is it and who is telling the story. And I think that some of you also brought this into your dialogues and conversations. The person who is telling the story, the way it is written, the language that is used, and the audience that is receiving it in a particular place all matter. And I think that is a huge sort of space for contemplation for all of us right now, because we need to consider whose voices these are, where are we taking it, and how are we understanding it. Definitely, terminology is something that keeps coming back into the conversation. What languages are we using? What are the definitions of those terms that we are using? We keep having this complete back and forth on these, very ideas all the time. And I think that platforms like this perhaps may generate more questions than they may answers. But the fact that we are together and we are able to look at those questions is something that is hugely inspirational. And I think I will just sort of end with this position of discomfort, because that word also came up several times. The curatorial position and the position of a writer or someone who is a mediator is a very powerful one. And we discussed this briefly earlier as well. How do we translate this power? Gauri Gill spoke about it this morning as well, along with Rajesh ji. How do we mediate this space where power structures are sometimes so skewed? Where are the meeting points? How do we define those meeting points, and how do we begin then to sort of break them down? Oh, sorry. Yeah, and create possibilities for more equity, more participation, and less segregation. This is the digital era. I mean, this is the age of AI. Everything is changing every day. And here, of course, Indigenous and Adivasi artists are also able to engage with that. They're able to use their phones. They're able to use the internet to share their work to a much wider audience. But in the end, I think that the consideration that there are these structures that are defining and devising ways in which everything is consumed, everything is made into a commodity, let's say, is something to really question a lot, because that's what we have learned to see with our indigenous arts. Those were some of the many different thoughts that were running in my head while the conversations were going on. And I want to say thank you again. Thank you to the entire teams here and the wonderful panel. I'll leave it there with, open for any of you to respond to any of the things that I might have raised, but also to open it up to the audience for comments and questions.
Speaking of terminologies, and I think that is one aspect I keep going back, keep pressing upon personally, because of the kind of colonial burden it holds. And I think it's so important to decategorize everything that we have been doing, especially in the art spaces or even otherwise, generally speaking, because any kind of subjugation actually begins from this terminology, in my understanding. You call it folk and tribal, and you've disseminated them ultimately, and culturally so as well. So I think this very aspect, as you rightly mentioned, Lina, we as a community together and in this very space must sort of look into this very strongly as to how we can sort of rename, essentially, in my understanding, this terminology to something that's actually attuned to the practices today, the practices that have gone off margins of the norms that have been pressed upon. I mean, they're not just rooted to what used to happen and sort of carried forward, but they're carried forward with a lot of narrative, with a lot of meaning, with a lot of sense, and capturing a lot around us. So I think it is a pressing factor to look into the terminologies, and I think one can begin perhaps not using certain terms, not using terms like folk and tribal. I mean, we come from, aspects that come from Adivasi communities should be regarded that. And I think I'll throw this maybe between Venkat ji and Santosh ji as to how they feel, but every time you speak to them, there's one aspect where they want to be seen as artists and not something labeled upon. So I think I'll leave that aspect there, but definitely something for all of us to think about and to mull over as such.
थैंक यू खुशबू. मैं एक बात जोड़ना चाहूँगा. जैसे कि अभी हमको गोंड पेंटिंग के नाम से जाना जा रहा है. उदयन जी यहाँ बैठे हुए हैं. उन्होंने किताब लिखी थी विवेक जी के साथ में, जनगण कलम. हम उसी के हिस्से से आए हैं, वहीं से आए हैं. लेकिन आज हमको गोंड पेंटिंग के नाम से, हमारे आर्ट को गोंड पेंटिंग के नाम से जाना जाता है. इसका कारण, जैसे भाषा की बात हो रही है या लेबलिंग हो रहा है या कुछ जो चीज़ हमारे सामने आ रही है, उसको मैं इसलिए कहना चाह रहा हूँ क्योंकि होता क्या है, चाहे वो मिथिला पेंटिंग हो या वारली हो या हम लोग जो गोंड कर रहे हैं वो पेंटिंग हो, इसमें क्या हो रहा है, करने वाला खुद को नहीं बता पाता है या लिखने वाला खुद को अपनी बात नहीं कह पाता है. सामने वाला उसे कहता है कि ये हिंदी है, ये तेलुगु है, ये मराठी है. वैसे ही हमको पूछा गया कि तुम कौन हो, तो हमने कहा भाई हम प्रधान हैं, पुजारी हैं. तो उनके समझ में वो बात नहीं आई, तो हमने उनसे कहा कि हम गोंड के भाई हैं, हम गोंड को बिलोंग करते हैं, गोंडवाना कम्युनिटी से आते हैं. उस समय उन्होंने उसे गोंड कहना स्टार्ट कर दिया और उसके बाद से ये जो पेंटिंग हम करते हैं वो गोंड कहना लेने लगा. लेकिन उसके पहले इसके करीब 8-10 नाम थे. भित्ति चित्र, रॉक पेंटिंग, प्रधान पेंटिंग, ट्राइबल पेंटिंग, आदिवासी कला, विविध कला, मतलब ऐसे नामों से पुकारा जाता था जिसका मैं गवाह खुद बना. और उसी नाम से, विविध कला के नाम से मुझे राज्य स्तरीय पुरस्कार मिला. हाँ, ये सत्य है. तो ये नाम कौन देता है? जैसे हम पेंटिंग कर रहे हैं, संतोष कुमार जी पेंटिंग कर रहे हैं, लेकिन नाम देने वाला सामने वाला है. वर्नाकुलर, अरे ये क्या शब्द है. इंडिजिनस, मतलब ये देसी हो गया. बाकी अगर मैं फ्रांस में रह के करता तो क्या विदेशी हो जाता. तो ये शब्द हमने नहीं दिया है. बच्चा पैदा होता है तो खुद नाम नहीं रखता है, उसके नाम रखने वाले दूसरे होते हैं, उसके दादा दादी या पेरेंट्स होते हैं. वैसे ही हमारे आर्ट को गोंड नाम रख दिया गया, जो मैं इसे गलत कहता हूँ. ये आज के समय का, वर्तमान का, जैसे स्वामीनाथन जी ने कहा था कि ये कला समकालीन है, ये वर्तमान की कला है. और जो रॉक पेंटिंग्स जो करते थे हमारे जो आदिवासी लोग, जिनको हम रॉक पेंटिंग के नाम से जानते हैं, वो भी उस समय की कला को करते थे. उस समय के उस स्थिति को वो पेंट करते थे, अपनी वो समय की स्थिति को दर्शाते थे. डांस को है, चाहे हंटिंग सीन है, कुछ भी है, तो वो अपनी गुफा के अंदर वो चीज़ें दर्शाते थे जो वो अपने दैनिक जीवन में करते थे. वैसे आज हम कर रहे हैं और हमारी ये ज़रूरत है. एक बात और कहना चाहूँगा, जैसे कि आदिवासी जो है मूल रूप से प्रकृति का संचालन करता है, प्रकृति को आगे बढ़ाने का काम करता है, चाहे वो जीव जंतु के साथ रहे या जंगल में रहे. उसके बिना ये प्रकृति अधूरी है और वो चित्रों के माध्यम से हम उसको दर्शाने का प्रयास करते हैं. जो सो कॉल्ड, जिसको हम कहते हैं ना कि हम लोग लिटरेट हैं. अरे लिटरेट कौन होता है? लिटरेट वो होते हैं जो आपको सिखाते हैं. थैंक यू.
Thank you. Any comments at the moment? Oh, yeah.
Thank you so much to all the speakers of this session. It's been so inspiring, and to Lina for your wonderful response and questions. And I do have a question for Chaitanya. I wanted to ask you, you titled your talk Speaking to the World, and you chose 3 women to discuss. And it made me think that in Indigenous discourse today, there's been a shift from processes of, let us say, repatriation, return of objects, to processes of rematriation, revitalization of worldviews. So in your choice of these three women as speakers to the world, are you signifying somehow that this revitalization of indigenous worldviews, are you signifying also this power of rematriation today?
Thank you. Thank you for your question. The reason I spoke about these three artists in particular is that I admire their work tremendously, and it has taught me a lot. So to begin with, my response to their work was affective. But when I think about it more systematically, I think that they are also articulating a way of thinking that breaks from the patriarchal norm, and it is by no means a norm that operates only in settler societies or colonial societies or indigenous societies or Adivasi societies. The patriarchal norm seems to apply in all kinds of social establishments. And it remains a struggle that needs to be addressed in all of those places. So there is a kind of strategic placing of these voices at the forefront, which is a task that all of us need to address ourselves to. Yeah. So 2 reasons.
I think we could take one last one question because of the paucity of time.
Yeah, I'll make it quick. Thank you, Lina. I like what you said about absences and the privilege of a curator. I wanted to, Kamayani, I really applaud the way, we are talking about who's speaking and who's telling the story. I like that you structured your thing through listening. And like a provocation, I want to, when I was listening to you, I was also thinking of eavesdropping as methodology within the archive, within, we are talking to dead people, right? So I thought that was very interesting. And usually, I like that you didn't resort to that kind of romanticism or exoticization, this thing, and it made me, so I'm waiting for that sequel, the paper that will come out of this exchange. And just one more small thing. आप जो बात कर रहे थे शब्दों के बारे में, लेबलिंग के बारे में, तो म्यूजिक में भी ये बहुत इसका एक है, जैसे ध्रुपद में ये आइडिया ऑफ तरीका, परंपरा, एंड आई हैव डन सम वर्क ऑन म्यूजिक एंड सो ऑन. डागरों में जो आप बात बोल रहे थे, जो मुझे बहुत अच्छा लगा, जो आप बहुत बात बोल रहे थे, उन्होंने पेपर छोड़ के आपको बोला कि कुछ कर लो. हमारे उस्ताद भी ऐसे करते थे, बोलते थे कि एक स्क्वायर है, इसमें आप चाहिए तो इतने सारे डॉट्स डाल सकते हैं, कुछ भी कर सकते हैं. तो कौन बोलता है कि ये परंपरा रिस्ट्रिक्टिंग है, तो वो इसमें बहुत सारी चीज़ें आते हैं जो इंडिविजुअल है और वो परंपरा के बारे में है, और वो करते करते ही हमको समझ में आया वो चीज़. और आई थिंक वो एज अ स्टूडेंट मैं समझ सकता हूँ. इंटरेस्टिंग.
थोड़ा सा प्रकाश डाल पाऊँगा इसमें, ज़्यादा तो नहीं. जैसे हमारे यहाँ घोटूल हुआ करता था. घोटूल आई थिंक काफ़ी लोग जानते होंगे, जो एक परंपरागत तरीका है जिसमें स्कूलिंग से लेकर के उसके यंग होते तक उसको बहुत सारी चीज़ें सिखाई जाती हैं. जैसे आज मैं स्पष्ट कहना चाहूँगा, 10th के बाद हमको सेक्स एजुकेशन के बारे में बताया जा रहा है, लेकिन जो घोटूल है, घोटूल में जो चेलिक और मुतियार जो हुआ करते थे, मैं अच्छे से जानता हूँ उस परंपरा को, क्योंकि मैं उसको देखा हूँ और मैं वहीं नज़दीक में पैदा हुआ हूँ. छत्तीसगढ़ था, अभी बटा है छत्तीसगढ़. तो जो चेलिक और मुतियार है, वहाँ पर जो भाषा है, भाषा कोई होती नहीं है. जैसे चित्र बनाने की कोई भाषा नहीं है. आपके सामने ब्रश और पेंट दे दिया जाए, एक बच्चा जिस तरह से काम करता है, उसको कोई बोध नहीं होता है, वैसे ही ये हमारी जो एक कहानी है, एक यात्रा है, मतलब हम लोग प्रीस्ट हैं जो बात कहते हैं, जो हम सुनते आ रहे हैं, उसको सिर्फ हम दिखाने का प्रयास करते हैं। जो एक शायद उसको हम परंपरा का नाम कहते हैं या पता नहीं, वो नाम दिया गया है, लेकिन मेरे अनुसार या मैं उसको सोचता हूँ कि ये ना आपके जीन्स में, आपके अंदर है, वो आपके अंदर समाहित है। किसी को कलाकार नहीं बनाया जा सकता, कलाकार खुद ही इनबिल्ट है, वो जन्म से ही होता है, उसको आप सिखा नहीं सकते, किसी गायक को सिखाया नहीं जा सकता, गायकी उसके साथ होती है। मतलब बहुत सारे एग्जाम्पल हैं मेरे जीवन में, मैंने देखा है। मुझे 40 बरस हो गए इस विधा में काम करते हुए, तो बड़े उस्तादों को भी देखा है, गायकों को भी देखा है, तो ये एक यात्रा है, बस यही कह सकता हूँ। और मैं नमन करता हूँ मेरे चाचा जी को बार बार कि उन्होंने हमें कभी ये नहीं कहा कि तुम ये पेंट करो या ये चित्र बनाओ, हमको उन्मुक्त रखा। आकाश आपके सामने है, आपको देखना है, आप उसे समझिए कैसे वो है। प्रकृति को हमने देखा, प्रकृति के साथ हम विचार करते हैं, उसके साथ रहते हैं, तो उसी के तरह हम एक जो हमारी यात्रा है उसको चलाते हैं। थैंक यू।
Thank you so much. So, yes, with this beautiful conversation, we'll go to the next. Tradition is a flowing river, and I think that it will keep moving forward. Thank you all, and thank you to the wonderful panel. The conversations continue. I think they will want us to take a photograph, so just wait here.